All right, we are slowly getting back and getting ready for our next session. Hi, Christoph, nice to see you again.
Hey, Gunnar. How are you doing?
All right, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you.
Excited for the presentation?
You have a huge crowd here. I saw 280 people at some point. That's impressive.
Yeah, I was also pleasantly surprised to see how many people are interested in the topic today.
Fantastic.
All right, so looking at the clock, let's continue. Let's reward the people who are on time. So I would like to introduce you to Christoph Aubrecht. He worked as an ESG special advisor at World Bank for almost 10 years. And now he has worked at the Global Development Assistance Program at ESA, also almost 10 years, I think. And he is program coordinator of the Global Development Assistance Program. He has a background in geography, cartography, also in business and communications, and has a PhD in remote sensing and GS sciences. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Christoph.
Thanks a lot, Gunnar, for the, first of all, kind invitation to talk to you all and to your network. It's really nice, and I hope we can use this as a stimulus to make more together, to kind of find ways to cooperate in the future. I think that would be very nice. First of all, before I continue, you can see my slides, right? I've started to share.
Yes, I can see the slides.
Fantastic. Okay, perfect. So I'll try to squeeze everything in that you asked me to do, plus all the interesting things that you didn't ask me to do. So I hope that everybody will find a few bits and pieces here in my presentation over the next, let's say, 20 minutes. So my name is Christoph Aubrecht. I'm based in Rome at the European Space Agency's Earth Observation Center. And indeed, I manage the Global Development Assistance Program, which is a program where we engage with, and actually the program is implemented in partnership with international financial institutions. So these are the development banks of the world, so to say. So that's World Bank, ADB, IDB, EBRD, EIB, the whole list of it. And obviously this topic is a very broad topic in terms of thematic domains that we cover, but I'll try to give you a bit of a snapshot on where this comes from, because it has started quite a while ago, and where we are trying to go to also. So let me continue here with the slides. First, for those of you who don't know the European Space Agency, a very brief snapshot. Who are we and why are we actually in this type of business or thematic domain? We are a truly, let's say, multinational institution. We have 22 member states. The important thing here is also that we really work for exclusively peaceful purposes. So we are not engaged in any type of military activity or using space assets for that matter. Germany obviously is one of the big ones, the big member states in ESA. In fact, in the Earth observation domain, it's the #1 contributor. And indeed also for my program, the GDA program, Germany is by far the largest contributor. So it's always good to liaise with different entities in Germany. I mentioned 22 member states. We have a number of additional cooperation agreements, but I don't think I'm going to go into detail here. You may wonder why Canada is part here on this map. It's always surprising for the European Space Agency, but this has obviously historical background. All right, so what do we do? We are a space agency that covers basically all aspects of space. I don't think we are going to talk about this today, so we focus on Earth observation. This is also the directorate that I am affiliated with, the Directorate of Earth Observation Programs. And within Earth observation, if we look at the types of missions that we operate or develop, launch, manage, you use your different type of term, we classify it in three, let's say, families. We have the scientific missions. We call them also Earth Explorers. These are really kind of new technologies that are, tested in space and ideally then run into some more operational type of setup. Then we have the Copernicus program, which is a European Commission-owned program, co-developed, co-implemented with us. So ESA is responsible for the space component. And then we have the meteorology missions. I think I give you a snapshot on the Earth Explorers because it is actually quite interesting what we have up there and what is about to come soon. For example, Earth Care or Biomass are two very exciting missions that are launching in the near future. And many of these missions actually provide data sets that are, essential or that are really important to address aspects of sustainable development, be it forests, be it atmospheric pollution, all kinds of things related to climate change, etc. I should also add that all of the data that comes from any of our satellites is open and free, but I'll get back to that a bit later, what that means also in the development context. What you see here is a list of the Copernicus satellites. So these are called Sentinels. We have a number of Sentinels operating. And indeed, this is the largest Earth observation, let's say, program that is consistently providing different types of data sets globally. We currently distribute around 300 terabytes of satellite data per day, all of it open and free and freely accessible under a joint data policy that's implemented by the European Commission and ESA. So this has been a real game changer, especially for the global development community. Considering that data accessibility, availability in developing countries is often fairly restricted. And with this, you can really generate a baseline and do a lot of monitoring and address a lot of sustainable development topics with open data. If we look at it, this is an example of the Sentinel-2 constellation. So it's an optical sensor that provides you a, let's say, picture of any place on Earth every 5 days at 10-meter resolution. And as I said, so these kind of weekly snapshots of the Earth's landmass is all available for free. That said, we also have, in addition to the free and open data from Copernicus and Earth Explorers, etc., we also have something that is more on the commercial side, and it's called the ESA Third-Party Mission Program. And this could be interesting also for your network, because it's in a sense free commercial data, or it's commercial data that is made available freely for research and applications. And this is, it's essentially data that are not owned from missions that are not owned or operated by ESA. It's a lot of different types of data sets that ESA essentially purchases, has access agreements, and then it's made available under specific licenses for research and application development. Here you see a brief timeline, and you see it at the right side, for example, we just had a presentation also from Planet colleagues, right? So PlanetScope is part of this. We have SkySat, and there recently we added Spire. So there are a lot of different types of very interesting missions that are there to be explored from an R&D perspective. So all of that, really now, I would say, takes us to kind of a new era of where we are in the use of space data. We are now in a position to really feel the pulse of our planet, right? So we have data on all kinds of parameters, and I would say there's really no justification anymore not to use that data, right? So that applies to industry, it applies to development, as well as to almost any other sector. So we should use the data. Obviously, we hear a lot of talk about innovation, right? So satellite technology is still considered like innovation in the development domain. And I would like to challenge that a little bit, right? So we've come a long way in terms of disruptive technology, disruptive innovation in the space sector, from launching the first satellites in, more than half a decade ago, to now having satellites that have AI processing chips on board and essentially can decide themselves what they what imagery they take and downlink, right? So there's a lot going on disruptive space tech, but that's not necessarily, I think, what the end user is really interested in or what they need, right? Often innovation in that context is kind of not necessarily a new product or a new technology, but it's a new way to address an old problem. And this is really, I would say, the key motto that we try to follow also in the GDA program when we work with development banks and stakeholders in client countries, to really show them and leverage existing technology, existing methods, algorithms, models which have been tested, where we know it works and where we know they can really generate impact at scale if adopted and mainstreamed. So, making the switch now to what we do on development, we try to tackle global challenges, right? So be it poverty, climate change, etc., urbanization. And we as a space agency, we can't do that alone. It's also not our mandate necessarily. So we try to play our role and leverage partnerships to generate impact. If you look at what Earth observation can do to address sustainable development challenges, this has been analyzed quite broadly, and I don't need to go into details. This is just a snapshot here on all the different SDGs and targets and indicators where Earth observation can play a role. And some of them, actually, Earth observation is the exclusive source of getting any type of idea on monitoring the progress towards these SDGs. So what we have been doing specifically with the International Development Cooperation community dates back more than 15 years by now. Actually, we started in 2008 to engage with the first development banks. It was the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and also the European Investment Bank at that time, to do small-scale pilots, demonstrations of what Earth observation actually can do to help those stakeholders addressing their challenges. This has really resonated very well with those partners, and it led us to establish a bit more strategic initiative we called Earth Observation for Sustainable Development, or EO4SD, back in 2016. And there we didn't do small-scale demonstrations anymore, but we focused on, certain key thematic priority areas that not us as ESA defined, but that were defined by our partners. And then for each of these thematic priority areas, we put in place a dedicated activity and, engaged with those partners in a fairly strategic manner. If we look at, those, let's say, 10 years before GDA, we already worked with more than 100 service providers from essentially all our member states. This is crucial not just for us as ESA, so that we can tell our member states we are inclusive, but it's crucial for the partners because it provides them a vetted roster of entities where they know they have gone through a competitive process. They are deemed valuable partners by European Space Agency, and the IFIs and development agencies can get back to that list and re-engage in a fairly straightforward manner. In EO4SD, we worked with about 120 different IFI programs in 75 countries. So this is very, very, a very global approach. And now in GDA, this number is increasing even further. So a few examples of what we actually did with GIZ. I actually went back to my colleague who managed the Earth Observation Clinic, which was part of EO4SD, and I wanted to just show you 4 examples quickly so that some of you that are online may find yourselves there, and maybe we can stimulate interest to do more along those lines. So one here is with the Cambodia team, GIZ Cambodia team. It was about, different types of services were requested, including water body inventory, monitoring, dynamics. So it was really about getting, temporal trends of water bodies. And I think you see here just a few examples from, a more regional scale and annual trend assessment to a very, very localized high resolution scale to do detailed water body inventories. Another example on the Philippines with the GIZ Philippines office. Here it was mainly about deforestation, long-term forest dynamics, but also to come up with a methodology for forest loss rate. So there, you have, again, making use of Copernicus data, but going beyond the globally available data sets, like some of what we have seen in previous presentations, to a more, let's say, customized, locally targeted approach that can then be co-owned by the entities and stakeholders in those countries. We have done two further things actually with Ethiopia, so part of technical assistance activities that GIZ Ethiopia office was implementing. And one, this first example here was about the classification of gum and resin-bearing tree species, and then also assessing the vegetation health accordingly. This was done with primarily a very high resolution optical imagery, but we have done in other projects also assessments of vegetation health and of certain tree classifications at a more regional scale, where you can come up with suitability maps, etc. The last example here on our GIZ collaboration was also in Ethiopia, this time about drought resilience. And you see here different types of services that were implemented, including site suitability maps, et cetera, et cetera. So, all of this, I'll share my slides later on, so they have links here, so you can then explore more on what was done in detail. So moving on from EU4ST, now we are in full swing with the GDA program, which is taking it to the next level and trying to really push for mainstreaming and adoption. So for it not to be something disruptive, some add-on, but something that's really integrated in the day-to-day work and planning. So I just on this slide entirely here quickly. As I already mentioned, adoption is the goal. We have for a long time, pushed for increasing awareness in the development community. I would say before that, availability and accessibility of data used to be the major problem. But I think especially since since Copernicus has come alive with the Sentinel data, this is not really the main problem anymore. Now it's more, this awareness, the acceptance of changing established traditional methods, and in the long term, really adoption, where we have to do a lot of capacity building, but even go beyond capacity building to transfer those types of skills into the local communities so that these stakeholders can actually continue doing it in the long run with limited, let's say, advice from the Western world, and not just being reliant on, us providing services. GDA, a snapshot, we have currently 14 participating states, so it's a subset of the ESA member states. It's part of a cooperation framework we have with the IFIs, so it's as a standalone program, it wouldn't really make much sense. And it's, we have by now mobilized more than 100 million euros using both space and development finance, and I'll tell you how this works. Here we have the participating states, but I go over this quickly. Can check it later. And what you see here is all the thematic domains that are being addressed in GDA. We have by now started 9 of those, so all the ones that are labeled in blue, and public health and forest management are about to come or start very soon. And then we have a new activity that we initiate later this year dedicated to climate adaptation and finance. So you see, we cover a very broad spectrum of thematic domains, essentially anything related to sustainable development. That said, these thematic activities are nested within a broader program framework in GDA. We have a monitoring and evaluation component that assesses or aligns all our activities to a predefined impact pathway. We have a knowledge hub that we are currently developing, which is also there to assist our partners in rolling out things at scale, implementing capacity building components, etc. We have the fast co-financing facility, which is in a sense the follow-up to the EU clinic. And here I would really like to maybe engage with GIZ if possible. And we recently also started a analytics and processing platform. I mentioned the 100 million euros. So how does this actually work? We have a certain budget on ESA side. It's currently about 40 million, the GDA program. And then we work with our partners to really leverage complementary resources, right? So both the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, as our core partners, have put in place dedicated programmatic structures. At the World Bank, as an example, it's called the Digital Earth Partnership. And they are there to facilitate coordination, but also to mobilize resources, both dedicated resources, but also, let's say, repurposing of existing finance, as well as aiming for a mainstreaming into operations, so lending programs, credits, etc. I mentioned capacity building several times already, and I think it's key. We put a lot of effort on that already in EU4SD, and now in GDA, this is, I would say, a bit more co-owned by our partners, who are tasked to complement what we do on the technical side with associated capacity building. So you see this like conceptually laid out here. We have 3 pillars of this cooperation framework, where ESA really focuses on the technical developments, on knowledge development, and then the IFI partners are taking it forward and complement that with associated efforts on capacity building and skills transfer. The current status, we are currently operating in about 70 countries. We already delivered more than 100 different distinct products, Earth observation-based products. And this is growing, obviously, because some of the activities have just recently kicked off. I mentioned the FFF, the Fast Co-Financing Facility, and I wanted to give you a brief snapshot also for later on, so you can look back on those slides to see how we could potentially link to that between ESA, the GDA program, and GIZ. So it's a follow-up to the clinic. It's a similar mechanism in terms of a rapid response instrument, where we have a large framework contract with a list of different Earth observation service providers that are on hold and that we can basically tap into for dedicated work orders. They cover a whole range of thematic domains. So again, we can, do work orders on almost any type of topic. The big difference to the EU Clinic is that for the FFF, there has to be a agreement on alignment of resources with the partner. So in that sense, it's not just for the partner to receive in-kind support by ESA, but to receive that and complement it with activities on the partner side. Excuse me. So what you see here is the different thematic groups. We have actually 11. Essentially, we have 10 thematic groups plus another one which is focused on non-EO information and analytics. So that is often merged with a thematic group, right? So let's say in the fragility domain, we don't only do Earth observation analytics, but we complement it with social media intelligence, open source intelligence, etc. So these kind of things can be mixed and mingled, and I think probably many of you who are online will find yourself somewhere in there. I wanted to, before I get towards the end, highlight 2 more things that we've been doing beyond thematically oriented engagements and support with partners. So one is that we actually can also use space to optimize investments. So this is an example we did with ADB, where we actually helped them to save costs on a new flood embankment wall, right? So with the use of Earth observation, they changed the planning, and essentially this saved about 20 to 25% of the initially scheduled or envisaged cost. So these are 5 million here for one project, but of course, this can be replicated, this type of methodology, and this is something that really generates concrete, tangible impact with our IFI partners. Another one is that we can also use it to mobilize additional finance, specifically climate finance. There's a lot of, buzz about climate finance. We have a lot of global funds, be it the GCF, the GEF, the CIF, the new loss and damage fund once it comes online, the adaptation fund, you name it. And all of these, obviously, when implementing agency submits a proposal, they look for evidence-based justification for the proposal, right? So in that example, we worked with IFAD to help them make their case to solicit GCF co-funding, and then essentially they were successful. We focus a lot on communication now also. We have built an impact sphere where we will actually showcase or have guided storytelling for all our activities around the world. So I skip over that, but hope you can explore that a little bit in the future then. And this is a final graph that shows you that ideally, or that we believe what we do works, right? Obviously, we can't now make a causal relationship between this graph and our engagement, but in a sense, you see that the timeline kind of matches. So what you see here is the mentioning of Earth observation related keywords in World Bank project documents over the last 20 plus years. And this has really, there's a pretty steady and sharp increase over the last 15 years, which matches exactly the timeline since when we started engaging with them. So I guess I leave it with this. This is still food for thought. If you want to learn more, we have a MOOC online, Space for International Development Assistance. So I'm sure you could find some interesting things there. And thanks again for the invitation. I think this quote summarizes it well. It's by the VP on Sustainable Development of the World Bank, who says that we now go beyond the fascination and we really want actually to use that data for real management decisions. So thanks again. And I hope there is some time for questions still.
Thank you very much, Christoph. That was a lot of input and a lot of different opportunities, I think, and a lot of stuff to digest. And maybe we can start doing so by handing over to Zeno, who had a keen eye on the chat and can summarize maybe the questions that have been posed there.
Yes, thank you. I will try. Thanks, first of all, for the wonderful presentation. I think the first one is maybe a little bit short one and kind of following the money trail question. Like you mentioned, that Germany is the biggest funder of the Global Development Assistance Program. And the question was if you can let us know which exactly is the institution, like the ministry or so, who provides that kind of funding, or maybe it's even different kind of ministries.
Sure. Yeah. Should I answer immediately, or you want to collect more questions?
Yeah, just answer and then I will.
Okay, perfect. So the way the ESA budget comes together is that every member state has a ministry that's responsible for space affairs, essentially, right? And then this ministry has assigns a delegation to the European Space Agency's program board, and the budget discussions are kind of made in that context. So in Germany, this program board representation of Germany is DLR, the German Space Agency, but obviously the budget comes from a ministry, and this changes often, but I think it's even a mix of different ministries. It should be the research ministry or transport ministry, something like that. Obviously not the development ministry, right? So it's different budget pot. Germany contributes 10 million out of the 40 in the GEDA program. And just for you to know what that actually means, we have a so-called industrial policy in ESA that indicates that the budget we receive as an agency from our member states is essentially spent back in contracts in that country, right? So minus overhead. So in GDA, it means that out of the 10 million, I can spend, let's say 8 or something million on activities and contracts with German partners to implement the GDA activities. That's how the budget works in ESA.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it kind of might link with the next question. So there were different questions, but basically they were all going in the direction of what if there are GIZ projects who want to collaborate with you, what you need from their end for the collaboration. Let it be for these clinics you mentioned, or maybe in general. Yeah, there were a couple, and maybe how would the process look like?
Good question, and it's something I wanted to get to, so it's nice. I mean, there are always different ways to structure cooperation, right? And hopefully a bit further down the line, we can look at different parameters on an institutional level, but obviously it needs to be filled with content, with activities. So the Triple F could be one of these instruments that helps us get the ball rolling on some things like we had with the clinic. And the process on the Triple F is really that it needs to be demand driven, right? So it's not ESA saying, oh, we have this great product and we want you to use it, but we would sit together with I think this network could be a great actually entry point to identify demand from your country offices, from whatever, right? Where you have projects and you feel that Earth observation, the use of Earth observation could make a difference, right? And then the process would be that we identify that demand. We also look how you or that team could absorb what we provide, right? How could we potentially co-design it or co-develop it? Could the team in the country offices complement what we do with associated efforts to train stakeholders on the ground, or these kind of things? So it's a bit of a step process where we would see what is the demand, how could it be integrated and absorbed, because what we want to avoid is that we deliver a product which then ends up being in a report that people read but nobody really uses it, and it has very limited impact. So the driving factor is that we want to generate and stimulate uptake and have real usage of these types of products.
Yeah, thank you. That I think in part answers another question, but maybe if I rephrase the question a little bit, when you collaborate with GIZ and you develop tools or something, are they accessible maybe somewhere, like combined? I don't think we have that in GIZ, if I'm not mistaken. So that maybe you have something like that?
That's a good point also. I mean, it depends. I think in GDA, we are now trying, right? We built the Knowledge Hub and also the Analytics and Processing Platform, which have this goal a bit. The Knowledge Hub is there to kind of give an overview on what are the EO capabilities on any type of domain and provide examples. And then the Analytics and Processing Platform is there to actually offer a bit of a sandbox environment where you can play around with generic services, right, which are open and free. But of course, then if you have a specific request in a country, you need localized context, you need customization, then we would have to work on that in a different manner. As a baseline, everything we fund in ESA is supposed to be made available, right? Obviously, we liaise with the partner institution if that's fine. But from our side, the baseline is to make it available. But sometimes we work in fragility context or something where the partner says, well, this product, we don't want it to be publicly available. So it depends more on the partner.
Yeah, we're running out of time. And maybe just to squeeze in two more questions, if I'm allowed, Gunnar. He's smiling already.
Yeah, right, hurry.
Yeah, I think you partly answered that question, I think, already, but there was this very precise question about whether you are helping developing countries to access commercialized services. If there are any options for the particular countries where maybe then GIZ is kind of the link, establishes contact, is there any opportunities, possibilities?
Sure. I mean, for us, to be honest, the goal is always fit for purpose, right? So that applies to the data we use, be it open data or commercial data, and it applies to the services we stimulate. Again, I mean, essentially, what we try to push for, whatever you can do with open data, do with open data, right? Because also there's resource constraints in the countries. But clearly, some parameters need to be addressed with commercial data. But there we try to, approach it from a way that the added costs need to be justified by added value. So it needs to be replicable. It needs to be something that the countries then take forward, are willing to take forward. Only then we push for commercial data set. On the services, yes, we position European industry, right, to get a foot in the door. So they can make commercial services. But essentially, again, they will only be taken forward if their added value justifies their costs. So we don't push for commercialization, we push for operationalization, where it makes sense to use commercial services. That's what we try to facilitate. And obviously GIZ can play a role in that, yes.
Okay, last question. Gunnar, I think there are maybe one or two more questions which maybe we don't answer now. Maybe can be answered in the chat. The last one was whether you, if there are any efforts to combine satellite data with drone data. Specifically here, agriculture biodiversity projects are mentioned, but probably you can also look at it at urban development or other things. Do you have anything there?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I mean, we obviously, with Space Agency, we try to focus on space-based assets. That said, we always combine with all kinds of different data, again, from a fit-for-purpose perspective. This could be drone data. Let's say, I mean, agriculture is one component where it could make sense, but we use it a lot in disaster response, right? For example, when it's too cloudy and you don't get enough optical imagery, you combine radar imagery from satellites with drone data. So there are different opportunities, but it needs to be reasonable, right? We don't do it for the sake of it. And the same applies to integrating all kinds of other types of data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are over the time already, so we have to end it at this stage. If you have access to the, thanks a lot to you. If you have access to the chat, maybe there are one or two questions I didn't manage to ask now. Maybe you would be able to answer them with the chat. If not, to the ones asking the questions, sorry for that. And I think I hand over back to Gunnar, right?
Yes. Thank you, Zeno. Thank you, Christoph. Thanks to all of you for posting these questions in the chat. And I think there are follow-ups to be held in the next weeks. And feel free to reach out to us.
Definitely.
At geoinformation@giz.de. I also put in the chat because I think we can link you to ESA. We are in touch with Christoph, and let's see how we can continue the discussions. I hope this was inspiring for you to start some.